Another aspect of this game that goes beyond just the 2D shapes of, squares and rectangles and hourglasses is verticality. Verticality creates a few situations that have tactical implications. High ground gives you more range than your opponent has, effectively. A player who's higher up will be able to shoot down at a player with the same weapon and hit them from a little bit further back than the person at low ground can hit them. It also gives you really easy cover because you're able to back up behind the ledge, and now the opponent below is going to hit the wall instead of being able to hit you if they put their shots at the right angle, with the exception of blasters and sloshers, where that's kind of their major thing. And high ground also lets you see over the top of cover. It makes it so that if you have like a long-ranged weapon that needs a long uninterrupted sight line to be able to hit stuff, like a charger or a splatling, then you like high ground because that means there are fewer walls that are in your way blocking your shots. So high ground kind of gives you these artificial open sight lines that, if you're looking at it in a purely kind of 2D sense, maybe you don't have so much, but because you're able to see over the top of the cover, then you do have it. High ground generally is an advantage in most cases. There are some weapons that can't really take advantage of high ground well, like the shorter ranged weapons, because they just don't have the range to hit anybody from off the high ground, but even then there are certain types of high ground that a short ranged weapon really likes. For example, on Inkblot Art Academy, the stack areas here are actually really good for short-ranged weapons because there are parts of the stacks where they're able to sit and shark and still have cover, but also the cover isn't blocking them from dropping off in multiple different directions. If you're at ground level behind the stacks, then you kind of have a couple of options that you can take to move around. But if you're on top of the stacks, you can drop down in any direction you want and surprise anybody who blunders walking past you. So high ground is generally an advantage with some asterisks and some weapon-specific issues involved. So if you're going to design a map where there's comeback potential, if you're going to design a map where it doesn't snowball, because I would consider snowballing to be a generally negative trait for a competitive game a lot of the time, you want maps that give bigger defensive advantages towards the end of the push, towards the point where they're starting to KO. Because you don't want a map to be something where whoever wins the first fight is just kind of guaranteed to win, and it's super volatile because it all depends on that one thing. You want teams to be having to fight and claw their way towards the later amounts of points so that you get those exciting matchups where they just barely squeak out to 3 points when the other team got to 4 points. And it's hard fought to get the rest of the way there. So you generally want to see a map that is one of a few kinds of formations, but my favorite of them is a bowl. With a bowl kind of situation, the high ground is all on the outer edges of the map. So Snapper Canal is one of the best examples of this. You've got Snipe and Perch and Window over here, which are all significant high ground points. Bats as well. All of these are some of the highest points in the entire map. And what's even higher than that is the spawn point over here. If you get pushed that far into your base, you still have an even higher place to retreat to. Mid is the absolute low point of the map besides, I guess, the water down here where you don't want to be. Court is one of the low ground points as well, but it's still very situated in the middle of the map. From spawn, you go descend into the bowl, into middle, and then you have to push uphill all the rest of the way towards your opponent's side. And this way, you're at an advantage on defense, and you're at a disadvantage on offense, pretty much all the time, in the general case. And I think that that's a good way for a map to be designed. It makes it so that you have to fight for all of the extra points that you get. It's never super easy. There's always a way back into the game, because you're always able to stop the enemy team if they get pushed too far in. Now, there are, some specific considerations about this particular map, but I think that that's a good general principle. Now, there are other maps that don't regard this principle that cause problems. One of the biggest offenders is Scorch Gorge Tower Control. Scorch Gorge doesn't have one bowl. It has, if you want to think about it, 3 bowls. There's one in the middle of the map, and then there's one in each team's base. The problem with that is that after you clear second checkpoint on the tower in Scorch Gorge Tower Control, your team, as the attackers, actually has an advantage as they push into the enemy side, rather than being at more and more of a disadvantage as they get closer and closer to KOing. Because the attacking team has had to, in order to defend the second checkpoint, win their way to this high ground. And they're able to just use this high ground up here and up here to lock the enemy team back further into their base. There isn't a really safe way to actually engage on the tower until it comes all the way down and gets to the third checkpoint, at which point they're very close to KOing, and it's desperation mode. If you put a crab tank in any one of these 2 places, you now have a better defensive installment than the enemy team who's supposed to be able to defend the tower from this position. And so clearing second checkpoint becomes a pretty brutal snowball on Scorch Gorge Tower Control. I have the same issue, actually, with a map that is a common favorite of a lot of people, which is Flounder Heights. Flounder Heights has a very similar second checkpoint, where as soon as you clear second checkpoint, the tower is moving downhill. There's only like one way to approach it, really, and the enemy team is forced to play from low ground as they shoot upwards at the tower, while there's a flank route from the enemy team coming in behind to capitalize on the fact that they have to look upwards. I think that this is poor map design. I don't like having, in the case of Scorch Gorge, these 3 bowls, because having to go down into the enemy side is way easier than having to go up into the enemy side. That's something that I like more about Rainmaker on Scorch Gorge, because at least in Rainmaker, after you clear that first hump there of the first checkpoint, you then have to climb all the way up to the summit into the very depths of your opponent's base to be able to get that KO. And I think that that's a lot healthier for the game. We have a similar situation on Mahi Mahi, our favorite punching bag in the stage design discussion. We have one bowl that's in the middle of mid and a bowl in each of the sides here. Now, the map does get significantly better when this area levels out and becomes level with the first checkpoint area. So this is less of a concern in a map like Rainmaker, but it is more of a problem in other modes where you're able to just get people up here and spawn camp. So one more variation of this that also sucks it's kind of a rare one, but Arowana Mall has this, and this is where you have 2 bowls. Here, there's the pit court area, which I'm going to consider one bowl, and then the other side's pit court area, where mid is actually a high ground position. And the problem with this is that it's very difficult to traverse mid, and as soon as you do traverse mid, you're immediately unsafe again to any long-range weapon. E-Leaders had a field day on this map because once you have to get over ramp, like, how are you supposed to approach someone who's up here? It's just way too difficult to get up there, and so these backline weapons just have a shooting gallery at the ramp area, at the plat area. It's pretty difficult to actually contest them up here, and so you kind of get stonewalled once you get to mid with not even that many specials that can take someone out of this position, even in that game where we had things like Stingray and Booyah Bomb. And so it over-centralizes the game around those things, especially since this map also has the rectangle problem, which made Stingray and missiles, which were very prominent in the metagame at that time, very, very complicated to deal with.